Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? It is Geoff Mosher and Adam Caplan, and this is a huge week for the Philadelphia Eagles. Also, a huge week for Inside the Birds, as we have a big partner to announce for the big game coverage. And Inside the Birds, big game coverage will be presented by Green Lawn Fertilizing. We are so appreciative and excited to have Green Lawn Fertilizing on board to bring you guys all of the Birds coverage leading off to kickoff and more on how important it is to have a nice green lush lawn. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But Adam, it is the week before the week leading up to the Super Bowl, but time flies. Nick Sirianni spoke. Things are going to start moving very quickly. And I know you've talked, you and I are down in Mobile, Alabama, so we will get into a little bit of the Senior Bowl closer to the end of this practice. But we know Eagles fans right now are locked in to the Super Bowl and the preparations. And I know we've both been talking to people down here and over the phone just about how you start doing this. The Eagles did this 2 years ago, so it's not foreign to them. But from when you glean, what is the week before the Super Bowl like?
Well, it's interesting. So when you walk around during the practices, you one of the things you see, it's interesting. I've seen this over the years. Like if some of the scouts and front office people, particularly scouts, the front office people typically don't come if it's like the Chiefs and Eagles guys, you're not going to see like Howie Roseman certainly wouldn't be here. He doesn't usually come anyway. There's a good chance you're not going to see like whoever his right hand man would be. It's typically the way it is because the top guys don't go because they're preparing for the Super Bowl, whereas the scouts come. Now, I say that I remember seeing Scott Pioli, who was the director of player personnel for the Patriots. He was here during a bye week. That's actually where I met Scott. The Senior Bowl. This is my 24th. It was 02, so I met him at one of the first two. I was just so shocked to see him. You usually don't see that. That's why I brought it up. As you brought this up, it made me think about what typically happens. But it's really for the scouts. Like that. That's what this week is for. Now, on the bye week, you and I saw some Eagles front office people, but typically it's just it's for scouting director and the scouts. But not every team sends every scout. They don't do that because they just have the East West Shrine. It depends on what the budget is and what you feel like you need to send and what you're trying to get.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and it's got to be a strange dynamic when, given how many players that the Eagles have taken from the Senior Bowl, for example, but not really having their mindset on that right now and being super fixated on preparing for the Super Bowl. And interestingly, Adam, we know this, and we kind of heard this coming down here, is that the Eagles weren't going to be sending as many people to the Senior Bowl. And certainly, I've looked around. I had a chance to. You can't see everybody, but there's certainly a smaller staff here than usual, smaller representation for the Eagles than usual here at the Senior Bowl. So you wonder, what does that mean for the draft and going forward? But right now, the fixation is on the Super Bowl, preparing for the Super Bowl. Nick Sirianni spoke about that. And I want to talk about something very interesting a couple of things. The injury situation we'll get into, and something that illustrates to me, Adam, that the coaching and the development that we've spoke about all year is purposeful, is intentional. It's not just happenstance. He was asked about the turnovers, Nick Sirianni. Specifically, he was asked about how all of a sudden the Eagles are punching the ball away from opponents, right? Like the old, like Peanut Tillman used to do. For those who don't remember, Peanut Tillman was a great cornerback for the Chicago Bears about a decade ago when they went to the Super Bowl. They were a defensive first team. And Peanut Tillman was a playmaking corner. He was a master at what they call the peanut punch, where he would make the tackle and he would punch the ball out. He must have led the NFL for several years, I'm sure, and forced fumbles from that position. And Nick Sirianni said he had Patrick Dolan, I believe it was, the one of the scouting staff members or video staff, put together a collection of all of the peanut punches and show it to the coaches and show it to the players. And that is an example of something that you do with intention and purpose, and then you watch it manifest. So what you're seeing from the Eagles, who have forced 9 turnovers throughout the playoffs, isn't just right place, right time, like turnovers can sometimes be. I mean, they are intentionally jarring the ball loose from the opponent.
Yeah, you saw Yeah, I mean, you saw a couple last week, which were clearly punched out. Then they had the craziness of the returner Jeremy McNichols running into his own player, but almost not all, but a majority of them were actually forced. Because sometimes you say, well, yeah, it's the official stats forced fumbles, but sometimes the guy just loses the football where you didn't really do anything other than you fell on, as you were suggesting. But a number of these were just really good plays. Burks had a nice job last week. We know what Zach Bond has done. He's had some big plays punching the ball out. Yeah, it's clearly coached, and give Nick Sirianni credit. Being the CEO and coach, it gives you more time to start looking at other positions, other side of the football more than you normally would if you're the play caller, or it's because it's not his scheme anymore. It's Kellen Moore's. Yes, he gives his input, but the bottom line is he's got more time to really put his energy elsewhere, and it clearly shows. It's not always easy to see what these CEO and coaches are doing, but this year it has not been hard. He's clearly had a better handle on this football team.
Absolutely, 100%. All right, here's what we're going to do in this podcast, right? Because it's nice. I mean, we have this week where it's the week before the Super Bowl. So what we're going to do is we're going to discuss how the rosters for the Chiefs and the Eagles have changed and what that means for this rematch. Because I think that there's a misconception about these two teams going into this Super Bowl that you and I can address when we go through the
Yeah.
rosters. Of course, we'll give the early word on injuries. I know you and Andrew DeCecco did an awesome job on a podcast this week talking about the injury situation. We'll continue to do that, of course. And then we will get into some of our intel here at the Senior Bowl. You mentioned what goes on. We'll talk about players the Eagles have taken from the Senior Bowl that have really been impactful for them. And that'll be a really action packed, insightful podcast as we continue to really lead up to the Eagles in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs. And I know everybody right now is hyper focused on the midnight green. And speaking of green, Adam, right? Spring's right around the corner. I don't know if you're like me, right? I can't do my own lawn anymore. I used to try to do it when I was younger. I can't do it
Yeah.
now. I don't have the energy. Yep, you're raising your hand. I don't have the time. We're producing podcasts left, right, and center. And ITB doesn't take a break in the spring or the summer just because, there's OTAs are done. We don't take a break. We're at this thing 24/7, 365. So I would definitely be someone who stresses about my lawn if I didn't have a great company like Green Lawn Fertilizing and our friends at Green Lawn Fertilizing to help out. All right. They're based right here in the Philadelphia area. And these guys are the experts in this region's conditions, including PA, New Jersey, and Delaware. Listen, they know how tough that drought was last year, and they've created a custom blended approach that will help your lawn recover. All right. Last year, Adam, was about it may have been the worst drought we've had since I can ever remember. I mean, it almost never, first of all, the year started off with nothing but rain, if you remember, right? It was like Noah's Ark out there, and then it went dry for like 4 or 5 months. So you saw these like lawns that were like, well, and then all of a sudden by April, May, June, July, it was like brown, 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 and the lawns were dying. Okay. Well, that's not going to happen when you use green lawn fertilizing. These guys are the experts. They know exactly what you need to do to make sure your lawn is fresh and lush. And, people take pride in their house and their community, and they want to have beautiful lawns that are well manicured. And this is why you need green lawn fertilizing. So if you sign up now, you can get 10% off. And I'm told this is a very limited time offer. So head to the link in the description box of this podcast, or you can go to greenlawnfertilizing.com/inside the birds and take advantage of that great deal. Listen, let Nick Sirianni, JalenHurts, let those guys stress about what they've got coming up in the Super Bowl. Allow green lawn fertilizing to be be your comfort. Let everybody else stress about lawns and lawn care, and let Green Lawn Fertilizing take care of that for you. So call Green Lawn Fertilizing again today, and we really appreciate them again for being sponsors of Inside the Birds and our big game coverage. That's greenlawnfertilizing.com/inside the birds. All
Guess
right.
what?
So,
I knew
yes,
this.
sir.
Real quick. So when we got this deal this week, I'm like, wait a minute, didn't we use them before? So I called my wife. I said, "Hon,
Mhm.
do we use green lawn fertilizer?" She said, "For years." So we have to renew. Yeah, this has to get done, by the way, because with the drought that we had, having
Oh.
the brown grass, if you want to call it that, it was like tumbleweed. So yeah, I just remember Green Lawn. Yeah, wow, that's pretty cool. So yeah, we love having them on board. Very cool, man. Very cool.
Listen, the last thing we need is other stresses in our life. So
That's
you let
right.
green lawn fertilizing take care of that, and then you're all good in life. All right. So this Super Bowl matchup that we're talking about, it's being called a rematch, and yes, there are a lot of familiar faces, right? There's Andy Reid, there's Nick Sirianni, there's Patrick Mahomes, there's Jalen Hurts, there's Darius Slay, there's Chris Jones. I get it, and I've heard a lot of people say, well, you know what? The Eagles this time around have the advantage, even though they lost the first time, because the first time was such a close game. But look how much better the Eagles are defensively. Look how much better they are with their explosive running game. And you know what, Adam? Those are really fair points. The Eagles are a better team. This might be the best Eagles 53-man roster ever. I meant to ask you that. Do you think this is the best Eagles
Uh,
53?
no, I thought they were better in 22, to be honest with you, in terms of roster. Because remember, they had Fletch, they had Reddick. Reddick was the best of his career by far. Let's not forget how good he was. Now, some people would say, well, wait a minute. The Eagles have a first team All Pro like Zach Bond. Yes, they did. Okay. I mean, yes, they do. TJ
Uh-huh.
Edwards was the Mike back then, and they had Bond. They had N'Kobe this year. Unfortunately, got hurt with a serious injury. And we'll go inside kind of how things have changed schematically a little bit. We'll talk to Greg Cosell about that. But things have changed. There's no Kelsey's. By the way, Kelsey was the center. Still, Isaac Seumalo, who's terrific. People forget how good Isaac was to end his career. That's why he got that big free agent deal with Pittsburgh. But their depth is better at a lot of positions. In fact, I would say the depth they didn't know was as good as it is this year. That's the difference. But Hargrave, by the way, let's not forget about Javon Hargrave, who got that huge $20 million a year deal with San Francisco. Why? Because of the way he played for the Eagles.
So yes, I think the Eagles front four and maybe even front six overall was better because they would just come at you in waves and they set the record for sacks. TJ Edwards played phenomenally, but you'd have to say Zach Bond has played at an even higher
Oh yeah,
level
oh yeah,
than
no
TJ
doubt.
Edwards has. Sure, Fletcher Cox and Hassan Reddick definitely played at a higher level than the Eagles front four now. Not to take away from the Eagles front four, but that was just a special front four rush that Jonathan Gannon barely ever blitzed, and he really didn't need to. But the back end of this Eagles defense is far and away better, way better. The only similarities are Slay and ironically CJ Gardner Johnson with that 1 year off in between. But when you have Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell over Avante Maddox and James Bradbury, who amazingly enough are still on the roster, you are far more dynamic. So it's tough. I think the defense overall, though, if you don't do it individual by individual, I think this defense is more structurally sound and better than the 2022 defense. And the offense is pretty much the same, but when you sub out Miles Sanders and put in Barkley,
Yeah.
but to your point, special teams, kicking especially, has not been as good. Jake Elliott from this year is not good.
Oh,
So you're right. It's very, very close. However, the counter to what I've heard from people saying that this is why the Eagles should win is because the Chiefs are basically the same team, but the Eagles are better, is that I think people forget that the Chiefs offense 2 years ago was even slower and lesser dynamic, much far, far lesser dynamic than it is now. I think people forget, Adam, that the Chiefs starting receivers in that game, and that makes it all the more amazing to see what they've done, were Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, and MVS, Marquez Valdez Scantling. Now, look at the Chiefs receivers now compared to that. What they bring from a DeAndre Hopkins veteran leadership and playmaking ability to Xavier Worthy's speed, right? I mean, this is a different offense. And now you've got Pacheco in year three.
yeah. So a couple of things. Exactly. Scott Moore barely played in that game. He did score. He was definitely a backup. It was
That's true. He
Juju
wasn't
Smith
a
Schuster.
starter. You're right. You're right. I forgot
This is
about that.
crazy.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is crazy. Smith Schuster started that game, then he left, and then he came back again. Just like on the other side, CJ Gardner Johnson left
Mm-hmm.
away for a year, then he's back. It's bizarre how that happens. You just don't. This is not like Major League Baseball. You just don't typically see that in the NFL due to injuries and scheme changes and so forth. But if you look at let's go inside the situation, see how things have changed here. So the Eagles returned 7 starters, 7 offense, 3 defense from the 22 team. The Chiefs returned 13 starters, 7 offense, 6 defense. Now, we also have to talk about the coordinator change. The real Fangio is here. They were running Fangio, as you said, under Gannon, but now they've got the real McCoy. Back then in 22, it was Andy was still calling the plays. Spags was the D coordinator. Now it's Fangio versus Spags, 2 wily veterans. You got to love that. The quarterbacks are the same. But structurally, when you look at the way the Chiefs are moving the football, it's fascinating. They have way more speed than 2 years ago. Not even close.
Yep.
But here's the problem. They're still a dink and dunk, short to intermediate passing offense where you mentioned Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Guy's a 9 route runner. Okay. Juju Smith-Schuster doesn't run that well anymore. It was just MVS for shot play. It was Kadarius Toney, Eagles nemesis for at least that game, of course, because him and Sky Moore scored. Sky Moore was a non-factor in 23 and barely made the team, and then he's on injury reserve, so he's not playing. But things have kind of changed. They remember Jerick McKinnon, how great he was for them out of the blue.
Yes. And then
Jerick
who was
McKinnon, back.
wasn't the other receiver too doing pretty well for Watson? Justin, was it, what's the guy from
From
Princeton?
Penn. Yes.
From Penn. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Justin Watson from Penn is a shot. He's still doing the shot play stuff. Noah Gray was not a factor then. Noah Gray is one of the better backup tight ends in the National Football League, particularly when they go 12 personnel, 2 tight ends, 2 receivers, 1 back. He's a pretty good athlete, but he's just not a good blocker. He's not a real big guy. But their speed now, if they could ever figure it out, and you never know moving forward here, Xavier Worthy has been used differently, not quite like they probably thought he would. Not a lot of shot plays. His average yards per catch, not probably what it'll be later in his career once he details more of his route running, but he's getting better. But he's had a really good rookie season overall. I'm telling you, with whether it's an end around, gadget play, short area, run after the catch, you got to worry about him. Hollywood Brown's is finally healthy off of the fracture of his clavicle, and it was a really bad one. It was actually more things involved in that. So I'm glad that he's okay, and he could flat out fly. But they've tried some shot plays, but they're not really hitting on him. But then you got the Kelsey factor, who 2 years ago did score against the Eagles, and the 2 receivers which you mentioned. This is actually from skill position point. And by the way, Kareem Hunt, now you add, he looked really good last week. We should mention.
Yes.
He pretty much took over for Pacheco last week because Pacheco has not been the same since he broke his leg since he's come back from that.
Kareem Hunt looks like the Kareem Hunt from 5 or 6 years ago. He's running hard. He's making decisive jump cuts. He's, running through players. I mean, this guy was signed off the street, Adam, right? I mean, it's sort of a typical Kansas City story. Like Juju Smith-Schuster, he didn't even make the Patriots. The Patriots have no wide receivers. And I'm not trying to make Juju Smith-Schuster out to be like Randy Moss now or anything, but he had a pretty good game against the Bills. He still can figure out a way to connect with Patrick Mahomes, get open, make plays, move the chains. And he's the type of guy where you're like, oh, I can't believe we just got beat by Juju Smith-Schuster. But guess what? He'll give you 5 or 6 of those plays a game, at least he has been lately, just to help them move the chains when they can't go to Kelsey or when they can't get the ball to Xavier Worthy or they're not running with Pacheco. So he's an important role player.
Yeah, Juju Smith-Schuster is a possession receiver. He's back. He doesn't run that well anymore. So now it's the 2 fast guys running after the catch stuff, probably more than anything. Though we keep saying it doesn't happen. Slay just continues to play well. We keep saying, well, teams we understand want to go after Slay, but he's there. He's not getting beat. But we'll see what they have planned. They're going to always bring out something. Andy's always got something. The Eagles saw what they saw 2 years ago with little gadget plays inside the 5-yard line. So we'll see what happens. And then, honestly, with the Eagles, you got the Barkley factor. You got the Hurts factor. And Hurts looked good last week. His knee was good. We didn't know that going in, how good he would look. He looked good. So you got to think that the week off is going to help. Although, talked to John DeFilippo, the former Eagles quarterbacks coach, who told me they worked during that week. They treated it as a normal week. They give the players off Monday and Tuesday. They game planned, and then they started having practices. They weren't very long, but they practiced Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, had Saturday off, and flew to where the hell was the Super Bowl 2 years ago? Arizona, wherever it was. Yeah, Glendale. So then they flew Sunday, which they're going to do this time. They're going to fly Sunday to New Orleans.
Right, right. All right, good stuff. So that is basically our discussion on the rematch, how it's not necessarily exactly the same. Let's talk a little bit about some early injuries, and then we'll finish up on some Senior Bowl. First, let's pause to hear a word from our great friends at Sky Motor Cars.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people all over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schulter, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
All right, Adam, the big news injury-wise, Brandon Graham, very interesting that, there's discussion of him trying to make it back for the Super Bowl. He tore the triceps. What week was that again? Was it week 11? I don't remember now the exact week.
Yeah, it was the Rams game. Yes. So let me give you the background. I was able to get a little bit more information here, which is I'll further the story, our information from Andrew and I, and we'll actually update this one a little bit more. So he tore his left triceps against the Rams on November 24th. He had surgery on December 3rd. And the triceps is your outer arm. Your biceps is here. If you're watching on YouTube, it's your outer arm. It extends from your elbow close to your shoulder. Now, I've strained my biceps. I've never strained my triceps. I've strained my deltoid, which is over here. Again, I'm a righty, but anyway, your deltoid is here. I got rid of it by just changing rackets and then getting it massaged out and stretched out. But here's the problem. You have to grab, hold, clutch, and punch. He's 2 months out from surgery. And we have no idea, and I'm going to look into this, whether he's been able to lift. Because here's the thing, atrophy could set in. So basically what it sounds like it's going to happen is they're going to designate him for return. That doesn't count against the roster. See what happens whenever they start practicing and see what he can and can't do. It's still a long shot. And then if he's able to do some stuff, they have to see exactly what that is and what he can do and what he can't do. They have to measure each against itself because he's rehabbing with them. They know what it looks like, but this is not football. You got to see what he can do in a football environment. It's still a long shot, but he starts reducing the odds. If he could clutch, punch, like what as a pass rusher, you got to use your arms and grab and move and displace. It's going to be very hard 2 months out. It's unprecedented. Like the TO stuff I got, and he felt he can do it. And he did. Give the guy credit. I don't know how the hell he did it, but he did it. Great story. This one is different. You're 2 months out. It's crazy.
If he could do it, he'd be Superman because that is really, really impressive. Now, if he can do it and he wants to do it and the organization wants it, Adam, they come across a roster construction issue because if you're going to put him on the 53, somebody's got to come off. If you want Britton Covey on your 53, somebody else has to come off. So you're looking at one and possibly two moves to be able to accommodate one or two players that may be on your 53 now. And it's hard to figure out where they would want to make those moves on the 53 with what they have right now.
Well, to be honest with you, the only guys who could be targeted to be released would be Lewis Cine, the safety, who they sign off the Bills practice squad. But honestly, I don't think they're going to want to do that. Why would they want to do that? And that's why they signed him to a 2-year deal, because they wanted to have him here rather than let his contract expire and, lose him potentially, because once you're a practice squad, once you sign a 1-year deal, someone else could sign you in March. You could just decline not to come back, but now they sign him to a 2-year deal, so he's an Eagle as long as they don't cut him.
All right, so let's move on to the offensive linemen. We have Landon Dickerson and Cam Jurgens, and Nick Sirianni said, Nick Sirianni is not going to give out injury information. Sometimes if guys are fully healthy, he'll be like, they're fine, but he obviously didn't say that. So it's going to be very interesting to see when these guys and really what they can do whenever practices really commence and they start getting ready for this thing. What are these guys going to be able to do and when, if?
So with Dickerson, it's his knee where he couldn't finish the game. Now, having a week off should give him a better chance to play because he gets the therapy on it. With Jurgens, as I understand it, it's just getting the treatment, keeping it loose, and there's some pretty good optimism here where Dickerson's just got to get through, keep the swelling down if there's any, got to work through it. They're not going to know for sure if he's going to play until next week. Now, I'm sure Landon will say I'm playing, probably would believe that, but let's just make sure. And we know what the contingency plan is. Jurgens did like next to nothing as we understood it last Friday. I don't know exactly what it was, but as we understand, didn't do very much. And the fact that knowing that, and they knew it through the walkthrough, they couldn't really, like, he wasn't right, and he gutted it out. I mean, you got to give the guy major props. And I love when you caught that, and a lot of people did, when him and Dickerson, I'm going in. You know, who's going in? I thought that was pretty good, but kudos to those guys. That was big time.
Yeah, they fought through. All right, so those were the really big injury situation things to talk about. We are again here in Mobile, Alabama. So we apologize for anybody listening if there's a little technical difficulties. Adam and I are both in hotels, and we're trying to deliver the best we can on Wi-Fi that is out of our control. But just want to thank everybody for listening. We do have some guys that we've been keeping our eyes on in the Senior Bowl, but we're going to get to that in the next podcast when we're back home. And we can really, because one practice is enough. We want to see it through. We want to talk to more people. And then we'll give you our list of standouts and guys to keep your eye on as the pre-draft cycle will start to begin pretty soon. That's going to do it for this episode of Inside the Birds. Again, presented by our great friends at Green Lawn Fertilizing. And we thank you for flying with us inside the bird.